To give a little background, my background is in something called craniosacral therapy. Are people familiar with craniosacral therapy? Yeah, a little bit. Nowadays, I don't do clinical work at all. I primarily work with lasers, develop lasers in different technology, and we do a seminar process called Stillpoint. I want to kind of share one thing before we get started, which if you understand this one thing, it's going to help tremendously in terms of the bigger picture of how I use lasers, what I do with lasers, the approach that I take, and that's something we call Stillpoint in our seminars. So first thing, before we pass out lasers, everyone try something. Everyone go ahead, take a nice big breath in. And now relax and let go. Now take another nice big breath in. And now stop right at the top of the breath. And just kind of hold this place for a moment. Relax, don't hold the breath. Relax the breath. The breath will keep going like it does when you sleep. Yet stay in this space between the breath. In our seminars, we call this Stillpoint. In my life, I live most of my life here. And the key technology that I am really most fascinated with is the technology of perception. Which I don't know why, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people that interested in it here on planet Earth. But to me, this is the most powerful muscle on planet Earth by far. And it's also the most underflexed muscle on planet Earth. Most people are just thinking, judging, going through life, constantly running that same program. I tell people, this is exactly like a computer. Make no mistake about it. This is exactly like a computer. You know, whatever you turn on when you turn on your computer, whatever you have on your computer, you have Windows, you have Excel, you have Word, you have a bug, whatever you have on there, when you turn it on, guess what you get? Whatever you have that's on there. And I tell people, this is what the basis of our seminar. We're not going to get too into this tonight. I just want to start the evening off by covering this, because if you understand this one thing, then everything else I'm going to do is going to kind of line up around this one thing. Well, this is the same. When you wake up every day, whatever programs you run, whether you inherited them from someone, family, parents, whether you went out and got them or found them, whatever programs you run, you're going to get that every day. If you run thinking, you're going to get a lot of thinking. You run emotions, you're going to get a lot of emotions. You run body, concern about the body, issues with body, you're going to get that. You run criticism or judgment or frustration or inner critic not being good enough. All of those are the kinds of programs that everyone here is running in some way, shape, or form. And in my life, I like to delete those programs. How would it be if you had a computer and everything you opened, everything just kind of stayed open, if you didn't understand how to delete things and close things? You know, you'd have the thing for like 2 weeks and then the thing would stop working. Everyone take another big breath in and stop right here. Now right here, okay, don't hold the breath, relax, the breath will keep going. Yet if you stay right here, try something. Try to hold a thought or an emotion. Not so easy. This is what yogis do. This is the technology of yogis. It's not so complicated. Now try while you're resting here. While you're resting here, try holding an area of tension or pain in the body while you're resting here in neutrality. Not so easy. In other words, this space right here is a delete key. You rest here, it's like a magnet. You know, the magnet holds things. You flip the polarity neutral, all the metal filings drop. Your brain waves, if they're always going like this, thinking, you hold things. You go neutral. So what we're going to do, in my life, I spend a good portion of my life resting right here. A good day for me is when I'm resting here. You don't hold stuff. Everyone take one more breath. By the way, you can do it at the top of the breath. You can relax, breathe out. You can do it at the bottom of the breath. You can do it at any point in between the breath. Or you can do it like I do it. I do it so much that for me, it's more like I don't even use the breath. It's like an autofocus, you know. The biggest problem that I see that people have here on planet Earth, and this is why I go around doing this, the biggest problem is people are horizontal to everything. It's called sympathy. Yogis call it sympathetic. When you're in your sympathetic part of your nervous system, you're in sympathy to everyone around you, everything going on. Someone's upset, you get upset. Something else happens. In my life, yogis are going parasympathetic. In my life, I look to be vertical to things. I don't want to be in sympathy to everything around here. There's too much going on here. How do I do that? Everyone take one more breath here. Stop right here. What you'll find throughout the course of the evening, every so often, I'm going to suggest, usually it's about every 15, 20 minutes, half hour, I'm going to say, everyone take a breath and drop in. If you come to our larger seminars, I do it. Basically, when I do that, that's about how often in my life I do it. In my life, I do it I go in a meeting, I leave the meeting, I drop in here. I don't want to bring all that stuff. And people get upset, then they come home and they land at home on their families. Clear that stuff. You can't hold it here. I have one more question for you. As you're resting here in this state, in this space, does it feel good? It feels good, doesn't it? I can tell it feels good. I didn't need to ask that, because what happens when people feel good? Their heads tilt a little bit. The eyes soften up. A little smile. Very slight. I tell you, there's a reason it feels good to rest here in Stillpoint. Okay, this is key. What they found with yogis live in this state. In India, they call it the breathless state. Yogis live in this state. The reason people feel good when they live in this state is that when you are here, your cells induce something called nitric oxide. The more you live here in this state, the more nitric oxide you have in your cells. And we'll know nitric oxide won the Nobel Prize a few years ago, the people researching it, because it vasodilates your entire system. It's a carrier for endorphins and opiates and serotonin. I was at the Anti-Aging Congress in Vegas a few months back. Now they're saying nitric oxide also, all the pharmaceuticals are into it. They want to stimulate nitric oxide because it's an inducer of stem cells in the body. In other words, nitric oxide's in the atmosphere. When you breathe all day, you're pulling oxygen. When you rest here, you're tuning to nitric oxide. Yogis have increased elevated nitric oxide levels in their cells, which is why in my life I like to live here a lot. That's why yogis are blissed out. I always tell people yogis aren't blissed. Bliss is not an emotion, it's a physiological response to nitric oxide. So we're going to cultivate that a bit tonight. Let's pass around some lasers. We're going to shift gears. The reason I start off covering that, if you understand that intro about, this muscle, to me, is what we're going to flex here tonight. We're going to use lasers and some other things. Yet, from my perspective, the thing that I develop technologies to do, everything I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share with you 3 or 4 different things tonight. The first one is Stillpoint. I already shared you the most powerful one. I'm going to share a few other things. They all have the same response. I made them all very specifically to induce, unwind, and bring me here. Because I really like to be here. If I'm in this state, life is really sweet. It's a lovely place here, planet Earth. I had major infection above a front tooth. This is how I got into lasers. I didn't wake up one day and say, gee, I'm supposed to make a laser here. I had a major infection, and the infection was a big problem. My dad was a retired dentist, and he was very insistent that I needed to pull the tooth because the infection was bad. The tooth was getting looser. There was no bone above the tooth. And I was very insistent that I didn't want to pull the tooth because my background's in cranial work. And in cranial work, if you pull a front tooth, often what they do is they bridge across the center, which can shut down the right and the left side of the cranium. So osteopaths, cranial folks, biological dentists always say never bridge across the center. And so I got into lasers because I was looking for an alternative to having to pull the tooth. I wanted to clean up the infection and regenerate the bone. And I tried lots of things. I spent 2 years trying almost everything I could. Rife units, different kinds of protocols, hydrogen peroxide. I did everything to try to rebuild and regenerate that situation. It was not until I tried lasers, and I'm going to go over a little bit about what makes our lasers a bit unique. Our lasers use 3 different wavelengths. The first one we use is red. This is a red laser. And for me, I used red lasers over the tooth, literally right up inside, right against the tooth. Every day I did it for about 15, 20 minutes. Within a month, month and a half, the infection was gone. Has never come back. From my perspective, the only thing, and hear me on this, because this is one of those things that what I talked about earlier about programs. A lot of people run the program that the body doesn't regenerate. They genuinely think their bodies don't regenerate. And so you have a problem. That's a great program if you're in the medical industry. The medical industry likes that program because when you have a problem and you don't believe your body can find solutions and regenerate, guess what that means? That means you're going to go find an expert really fast. And you're going to do whatever they tell you because you really just don't trust the body. Well, I tell everyone in our seminars, you come to our larger 2, 3, 4-day seminars, I tell everyone, start deleting some programs. If you run that program, body doesn't regenerate, pull it up here and take a breath. Stop here. delete it. It's not a right program. The only thing your bodies ever do is regenerate. The reason I use lasers, every day for me, my view, I got challenges every day. Every day I jump in and say, okay, what am I going to dig on? What am I going to work on today? It's like a garden. This is like a garden. You know, if you had a garden, would you sit by and just let the weeds grow and say, well, we'll see what grows, you know? For me, I am not into random, you know, if I have a challenge, I don't want to sit around and just say, well, we'll see what happens to it. I want to dig in and see what can I do to change the physics of the situation. Okay, second key wavelength I use, this is infrared's really good. Oh, let me just say, when I resolved the tooth situation, the infection was gone. I knew the infection was gone because the pain went away. The tooth started getting harder, it's more solid, pain went away. So I went back to my dad. I said, you know, pain's gone. I took care of this thing, you know. He says to me, he said, well, you still have to pull the tooth. And so I said to him, I said, no, definitely not pulling the tooth. And he had to x-ray. We did x-ray. You know, he said, you know, look, the fuzzy area above, you could see white, and then it was fuzzy. You can't see any bone. He says, it's called reabsorption in dentistry. He said, there's no bone there. Eventually, the tooth is going to come out. You know, he taught at Yale in dentistry. So he, you know, had some reference for what he was talking about. I said, okay, good. Well, I researched. Well, guess what? Infrared rebuilds bone, according to every study done on infrared lasers. I lasered for 4 months, every day, twice a day, 10, 15, 20 minutes, twice a day. And I went back and I said, okay, let's take another x-ray. We did another x-ray. There's bone all the way across the tooth now. I tell people, you know, get clear in your perception about what you do here. Because the only thing you do, not you, your personality, the only thing you do biologically is to replicate cells constantly. That's it. If any part of you stops doing that, you are done here. By the way, there's one more thing that activates nitric oxide levels, which is why I use them a lot. Guess what they are? Lasers. Lasers have been found in numerous studies to increase nitric oxide. In fact, from my perspective, no one talks about this, but from my perspective, the reason that lasers are so good for pain is it's proven that when you use lasers over different areas, it increases nitric oxide levels in the cell, which it opens up endorphins and serotonin and all sorts of really good things. So when I discovered nitric oxide years ago, I was like, cool. This is cool. This is the key to, you know, a lot of people talk about like being in the now, you know, and just rest in the presence and be in the present moment and all these words. And it's great. I love all that stuff. It's great. But it's kind of a little bit still theoretical. It's like, well, what does that mean? How do you actually get there? What I'm telling you in my life, you want to rest in the present in every moment and be totally in a nice state. Just take a breath, stop right here, and hold it. Don't hold the breath. The breath will keep going, but hold in that state. If you can delete stuff on your computer, which everyone here can, program you don't like, you remove it. You delete something, you can delete stuff. If you can delete stuff on your computer, you can delete cell memory, emotions, and beliefs. Easy.